The cold hit me before the smell did. My boots crunched on ice as I stepped onto the porch, duffel slung over one shoulder, breath fogging in tight little bursts. The house was dark. No wreath, no string lights, no plastic reindeer my mother loved to drag out the second Halloween ended. Just a dead porch light and a wind chime clacking like teeth in the December wind. I frowned and rang the bell anyway, more out of habit than hope. No footsteps, no muffled, "Just a second," from my mother. Just the hollow echo of the chime and the faint hum of my truck engine behind me. I keyed in the old code, expecting the lock to stick and the alarm to beep. The door swung open too easily. Cold air spilled out. Colder than outside somehow, with that dry, empty chill of a house that's been left alone. I stepped into a darkness that smelled faintly of dust, stale coffee, and something else under it. Sour and wrong. "Mom?" I called. "Dad?" My voice sounded too loud in the empty hallway. No answer. I set my duffel down, the thud of it echoing off bare walls where Christmas photos should have been. The console table that usually held a bowl of ornaments and scented candles was empty. Under the weak glow of the streetlight leaking through the front window, something white caught my eye on the kitchen counter. A ripped page from a yellow legal pad held down by the old ceramic salt shaker. I peeled it free. We went on a cruise. You take care of Grandpa. That was it. No love Mom and Dad, no dates, no instructions. Just a sentence that turned my stomach hot, then ice cold. The thermostat on the wall read 52 degrees Celsius. The unit whined faintly, doing nothing. I hadn't taken my coat off yet, and my fingers were already numb. A faint sound drifted down the hallway, not a word, more like a broken exhale, a low, raw groan. "Grandpa?" I called. Silence, then another sound, softer. Wet. My hand went to the little flashlight in my cargo pocket before my brain caught up. I clicked it on, the beam slicing down the hallway, hitting framed school photos, a crooked wedding picture, my own boot prints in dust. The guest room door, the one they'd moved him into when his mobility started getting worse, was half open. A draft crawled out from the crack, touching my exposed wrist like icy fingers. I pushed it open with my shoulder. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Old urine, sweat, sick skin, and cheap disinfectant that hadn't been used nearly enough. The second thing was the cold. It bit the inside of my nose, thinner and harsher than the hallway air. "Jesus," I breathed. He lay on top of the bed, not under it. No blanket over his body, just a thin fleece twisted under one arm like it had slipped off hours ago. His pajama shirt was soaked and stuck to his chest. The sheet beneath him was stained dark. His lips were tinged blue. I crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to my knees beside the bed, fingers already moving on autopilot. 2 to his carotid, pressing into paper-thin skin. Thready pulse. Weak. But there. "Hey," I said, leaning close. "Grandpa, it's Lily. I'm here." His eyelids fluttered, lashes crusted. For a second, his pupils rolled, unfocused. Then they locked onto my face with a flicker of recognition and something darker, shame. Lily," he rasped. It came out like broken glass dragged over gravel. His breath brushed my cheek, shallow and cold. I pressed the back of my hand to his forehead. Cool, not feverish. That was worse in this temperature. "Okay, Harold," I muttered, slipping into medic voice before I even meant to. "You know the drill. We're going to get you warm." I shrugged off my marine winter coat and wrapped it around him, tucking it in under his shoulders and arms as best I could without jostling him too hard. He flinched when my fingers brushed his hip, and a sharp hiss of breath escaped him. "Pain?" I asked. "Where?" He tried to lift a hand, fingers trembling, and let it fall uselessly back to the mattress. "Where?" he whispered. The room was wrong. No space heater, no extra blankets. The vent in the ceiling was dead, covered in a thin layer of dust. A half-empty glass of water sat on the nightstand, ice long melted, ring of condensation dried into a pale halo. My heart slammed once, hard. I pulled my phone with my free hand and punched 911. "Emergency dispatch, This is Staff Sergeant Lily Harris," I said, eyes on my grandfather's face. "I'm at 214 Maple Grove. Elderly male, hypothermic, possibly dehydrated, soaked bedding, Temp in the house is 52. He's conscious, but barely. I need an ambulance now. My voice was steady. Too steady. Years of training lined up behind every syllable, sliding into place like weapon parts. Ma'am, is he breathing? The operator asked. Yes, shallow. Pulse present weak, no visible bleeding. I'm starting passive rewarming, but we need active in the ER. Okay, help is on the way. Stay on the line with me. I propped the phone between my shoulder and ear, using both hands to peel back the soaked pajama shirt and slide a dry bathrobe from the chair under my coat. Anything to create layers. His skin was mottled, goose flesh standing out stark on his thin chest. Lily, he whispered, voice trembling. They left? The words curled and dot in the cold air. Yeah, I said softly, jaw clenching. They left a note. I didn't say what it said. Not yet. Hot, useless anger flared in my ribs, threatening to break my composure. I forced it down into a hard, focused point. EMS is 3 minutes out, the dispatcher said. Keep him talking if you can. Grandpa, I said, leaning close so he could hear me. I need you to stay with me, okay? Think of Grandma yelling at you for sitting on a cold porch. A faint smile ghosted across his cracked lips. Your grandmother, he murmured. She'd skin me for this. That's right, I said. And then she'd feed you pie. His eyes flickered, then sharpened for a second like he was seeing something behind me. Lily. Yeah? Listen, he whispered. They don't know. Don't know what? He swallowed, throat working with effort. About the papers, he croaked. About what we did. Me and your grandma. My brain filed that away for later. Right now, keeping his core temp from dropping further mattered more than any mystery documents. We'll talk about that when you're not trying to die, I said. He shook his head weakly, frustration twitching his jaw. No, he gasped. Listen, they left me. They cut phone, money, heat. His fingers clutched at my sleeve with surprising strength, nails scraping the fabric. You get the papers in the Bible, under Isaiah. Start where she prayed. The words came in gasps, punctuated by tiny shudders. Footsteps pounded on the front porch. The operator's voice said something I didn't catch. Sirens incoming, she repeated louder. They're there. Red and blue light strobed faintly against the wall, seeping through the thin curtains. Grandpa, I said, squeezing his hand back. You're not alone, I've got you. He turned his head toward me, eyes wet, breath a shallow rattle. Lily, he whispered. Don't let them get away with it. The plea cut through every layer of training, duty, and childhood loyalty in one clean line. I felt it settle into my spine like a weight I recognized from other missions. I won't, I said. And I meant it in a way that had nothing to do with impulse and everything to do with the man on this bed and the woman who'd written notes in the margins of her Bible for decades. The EMTs burst into the room with a gust of slightly warmer air, gear rattling, radio crackling. What have you got? One asked, kneeling on the opposite side of the bed. Elderly male, prolonged exposure to cold, suspected dehydration. I rattled off. Temp in the room around 40. Soaked linens. Oriented ×2 intermittently. Pulse thready. Respirations shallow but present. They moved with competence, sliding a thermal blanket over him, checking vitals, transferring him to the stretcher with a practiced gentle lift. As they wheeled him toward the door, Grandpa's hand reached out blindly. I caught it, walked alongside until the doorway forced me to let go. He squeezed once. Revenge, he whispered, voice barely audible over the oxygen hiss. But the right kind. Then he was gone, swallowed by flashing lights and the crunch of boots in snow. The house fell silent again. Cold. Empty. The ripped legal pad note still lay on the counter, the lazy loops of my mother's handwriting staring up at me like a dare. We went on a cruise. You take care of Grandpa. I picked it up and held it in my gloved hand until the paper softened with warmth, Then I folded it carefully and slid it into my uniform pocket, next to the dog tags that had seen me through firefights and dust storms half a world away. They had no idea what they'd just done, but my grandmother had. Start where she prayed, I murmured to the empty kitchen. The house hummed faintly, the furnace still set criminally low. I turned the thermostat up until the display hit 70 and the old unit rattled awake, hot air finally starting to push back the cold. They had left him to freeze. They'd left me a mission, and I was done coming home and pretending this family's cruelty was anything but what it was. The ER lights were too bright. They always are, hard white, flattening everything, turning blood into rust and fear into paperwork. I walked beside the gurney until a nurse with kind eyes and cracked knuckles held up a hand, sigh. You can't come back here, hun, she said. We gotta work. I'm a medic, I said automatically. And Staff Sergeant Harris, I can... She shook her head, already pushing through double doors. You did the field work, she called. Let us do the hospital part. The door swallowed them, the stretcher, the blankets, the blue-tinged hand that had gripped my sleeve. I stood alone in the sliding glass vestibule, the automatic doors breathing cold air in and out like some giant mechanical lung. My coat was still on him. My own arms prickled under my thin camis. A tech at the front desk cleared their throat. Ma'am, we, need some information. Name, date of birth, address, allergies, baseline mentation, medical history. I rattled off what I knew, filled in blanks with, I'll have to check his chart, watched the clerk's fingers tap across the keyboard. Relationship? They asked. Granddaughter, I said. Something in my voice made them look up. Who was with him at home? They asked. I thought of the note on the counter, the thermostat reading. No one, I said, not when I got there. Their mouth pressed into a thin line. We'll have social work come talk to you, they said. I took a seat in the waiting room, plastic chair bolted to the floor, the vinyl cold through my fatigues. Somewhere down the hallway, a baby wailed. The TV in the corner rolled through a loop of holiday commercials, families in matching pajamas, clinking mugs, string lights and snow globes. I stared at the floor. 15 minutes later, my arms goosebumped. A woman in a gray cardigan and ID badge appeared, holding a clipboard like a shield. Staff Sergeant Harris? She asked. That's me. I'm Dana, she said. Hospital social work. She sat, leaving a respectful empty chair between us. Your grandfather's in Warming. He's stable for now. Stable. Military word, medical word. It just meant not actively dying this second. She flipped through her paperwork. Can you tell me what you walked into? She asked. I told her. The note, the thermostat, the soaked bedding, the empty fridge, the cut phone line. I'd tried the house phone on my way out. It had just hummed dead. She wrote in quick, tight script. And your parents are, where exactly? She asked. On a cruise, I said. Somewhere warm, apparently. Her jaw worked for a moment. Do you have their contact information? She asked. I rattled off numbers I knew by heart, but barely used. She thanked me, stood, and disappeared down a hallway. I checked the clock. 10 minutes, 20, 30. Sleep tugged at the edges of my brain. Jet lag, emotional whiplash. But my body had fallen into the familiar posture of waiting. Back straight, feet flat, senses narrowed to the next door opening. The next name called, the next alarm. They finally let me see him 2 hours later. His room and ICU glowed soft orange from a warming unit. A heated blanket covered him to the neck, cords and lines snaking from his arms and chest. The beeping was steady, almost soothing in a twisted way. His cheeks had regained a little color. His lips were pink, not blue. Hey, old man, I said softly, stepping to the bedside. His eyelids flickered. When he opened them, they found me quicker this time. Marine, he rasped. It sounded less like a question, more like a greeting. Yeah, I said. Still me. A nurse checked a monitor, wrote numbers on a chart, and slipped out, leaving us in a bubble of machine hum and heated air. Social worker talked to me, I said. Said what happened might be considered neglect, maybe abandonment. He stared at the ceiling. They call it what it is, he said after a moment. His voice was stronger now, though every word still looked like it cost him. You don't leave a man with no heat, no food, no phone, not when it's freezing. His hand shifted under the blanket. I slid my fingers into his until he had something to hold. How long? I asked. How long what? How long has it been like that? He gave a slow, bitter smile. How long you been gone? He asked. Couple of years overseas, I said. Home a few times, not like this. Then about that long, he muttered. Started small. Thermostat turned down to save money. Groceries forgotten. Your mother complaining I eat too much for someone who doesn't work. His cheek twitched. They told you they were supporting me, didn't they? He asked. Yeah, I said. Said they were carrying you, that my checks helped. He huffed a humorless breath. I'm the one that set them up in that house, he said. Paid off their debt when your daddy's business ventures fell apart. Your grandmother and I, we saw it coming. I thought of Grandma's voice on the phone before she died. Always cheerful, always asking about my training, never complaining. We tried not to worry you, he said. You were doing real work, but we also made a plan. He tightened his grip around my hand, surprisingly firm. They don't know about the documents, he said. The deeds, the will, the accounts. He took a breath, winced a little, pushed through. They think they own this house outright, he said. They don't. It's still in my name with options. For you. The room seemed to shrink around us. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. We were going to, he said. Then your grandmother got sick. Then you deployed again. I thought I had more time. His gaze slid to the small cross on the wall. Guess I was wrong, he said quietly. Silence hummed for a moment, filled by the soft whoosh of warm air and the beep of the heart monitor. What do you want me to do? I asked. He turned his head toward me, eyes suddenly sharp and clear, no fog. You remember that Bible she kept by her chair? He asked. Brown cover, pages all marked up. She'd read it till the words faded. Yeah, I said. She used to fall asleep with it open on her chest. She hid things in there, he said. Letters, instructions. For you. And in my desk, cigar tin. You start there. He paused, catching his breath. I'm not asking you to burn everything down, he said. I'm asking you to make it right. Make them face what they did. Make sure they never leave someone like that again. His voice cracked on the last word. You want revenge, I said. One corner of his mouth lifted. I want accountability, he said. If that feels like revenge, that's between them and God. Footsteps approached. The social worker, Dana, poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, she said. Mr. Harris, I spoke with your son and daughter-in-law. Grandpa's eyes rolled, a long-suffering gesture that somehow still made me smile. And? He asked. They're, out of the country, she said carefully. Said you were fine when they left, and that you like the temperature cooler. Her gaze flicked to me, apology in it. I documented our conversation, she added. Per protocol. Per protocol, Grandpa repeated, like it was a foreign language. Dana stepped closer. Mr. Harris, she said gently, what happened to you meets the criteria for elder neglect, possibly abandonment. I know that's hard to hear, but it also means you have rights here, choices. We can help keep you safe. He looked at me, not her. Did you hear that, Marine? He asked. I've got rights. Yes, sir, I said. His hand trembled around mine. Then I choose you, he said, to help me use them. Something moved in my chest, an old, familiar click, like a safety being flicked off. Copy, I said. Well, we'll treat this like a mission. Dana watched the exchange, something like respect softening her eyes. I'd like to talk to you both more about next steps, she said. When you're ready. Talk to her first, Grandpa said, nodding at me. She's got the clearer head. I wasn't sure that was true. Anger pulsed in my veins like an extra heartbeat. But anger, I'd learned, could be channeled. I'll meet you outside, I told Dana. When she slipped out, Grandpa squeezed my hand again. You'll find things in that Bible, he said. From her, from me. Don't let your parents talk you into keeping the peace. Peace without truth is just more cold. I know, I said. He gave a small nod, satisfied. Then go, he murmured. You've got reading to do. I hesitated. You going to be okay here? I asked. He snorted softly. Warm blanket, IV. Nurse that actually looks at me when she talks, he said. I've been worse places. I smiled. Me too, I said. I kissed his forehead, cool, not icy, and straightened. The walk down the hospital corridor felt like transitioning between worlds. ICU hummed behind me, fluorescent hallway lights ahead, the smell of sanitizer giving way gradually to the faint scent of vending machine coffee, and rain-damp coats in the waiting area. Outside, the air slapped my face, sharp and clean after the recycled hospital breeze. Snowflakes drifted lazy and sparse under the streetlights, half-hearted. I drove back to the house on muscle memory, hands steady on the wheel, mind running checklists. Scene secure, casualty stabilized. Next objective, secure intel. The house looked the same as when I'd left it. Dark, sullen, offended at being disturbed. Inside, the heat had done its work. The air was no longer biting, just cool. My breath no longer smoked. I went straight to the den. The recliner where Grandma used to sit was still angled toward the TV, a thin film of dust softening the armrest where her fingers once tapped during game shows. The bookshelf behind it sagged under the weight of old paperbacks and worn photo albums, and there on the side table sat her Bible. Brown leather cover, edges darker where her thumbs had rubbed them over years. A dried daisy was pressed between the front pages, a small scrap of summer in the dead of winter. My fingers shook just a little as I lifted it. The leather was warm from the room, faintly smooth under my calloused hands. The spine creaked gently when I opened it. Highlighter bled through pages, pink, yellow, blue. Verses underlined. Notes in the margins in her looping script. Pray for patience with Tom, one read. He does not know what he does. Thank you for Lily's courage. I swallowed. Halfway through, the pages felt thicker. I slid a thumb along the edges and found resistance, a gap, a wedge. Something had been slid deep into the spine. Start where she prayed, Grandpa had said. I turned to Isaiah, where her bookmarks always rested when I'd seen her nodding off on Sunday afternoons. And there, nestled snug between the onion skin pages, was an envelope with my name on it. Lily. All caps, firm, ink slightly smudged like she'd gone over each letter twice. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, loud as artillery. I slid a finger under the flap, feeling the paper fibers give way. Whatever was inside, Grandma had meant it for me. Not for my parents, not for lawyers. For me. The cold of the morning, the heat of the hospital, the sting of the note on the counter, they all narrowed down into this one fragile moment. I took a breath, steady and deep like before a breach. Then I opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages, written in blue ink that looped and swirled just like it had across every birthday card she'd ever sent me on deployment. I read it standing in the den, boots planted on the worn rug, the house humming faintly around me. My Lily, it began. If you're reading this, it means 2 things. Your grandfather lived long enough to be stubborn, and something feels wrong. She didn't waste words. She laid it all out in her neat, uncompromising way. Your father and mother mean well when it suits them, she'd written, but they have always confused comfort with character. Your grandfather and I built safety nets because we knew one day they might choose comfort instead of duty. My throat tightened. If you ever find yourself feeling that wrong in the house, the letter continued, I need you to trust it. Trust yourself. Call David Monroe. We've already spoken to him. He knows what to do. And don't let anyone tell you you're making trouble. You are being faithful. His name and number were underlined twice. On the second page, she explained the structure. House still in Grandpa's name, with a life estate interest recorded for me. Savings split, with my share protected in a separate account. My parents entitled to use, not own, under specific conditions. Care, presence, basic decency. If they fail that test, she wrote, I want you to hold the line I never could with my own son. The last line stopped me cold. Revenge is fire and dry grass, baby. It burns everything. I want justice. Justice plants something after the fire. I let the letter sag in my hands for a moment. Air thick in my lungs. The house felt different now, less like a crime scene, more like a battleground I hadn't realized was already mapped. I folded the pages carefully, slid them back into the envelope, and tucked it into my uniform pocket. One breadcrumb down. Grandpa had mentioned a cigar tin. I moved to the old roll-top desk against the far wall, the one that had always been off-limits when I was a kid. The surface was dusty, but under my fingers I could feel the grooves where Grandma's hands had once moved bills and letters into careful piles. The top drawer squeaked when I pulled it open. Pens, old receipts, a dried-out rubber band that snapped when I nudged it. Second drawer, rubber stamps, an empty checkbook, a stack of church bulletins. Third drawer, shoved toward the back, half buried under a faded bank calendar, a small square tin with a chipped cigar label. I pulled it out, heart beating a notch faster. The lid slid off with a metallic rasp. Inside, stacked tight like hard-won rations, were photocopies, deeds, bank statements, a will, all clipped neatly with Grandma's tiny paper clips. On top, in a sticky note, stuck askew. For Lily, if things feel wrong. The first deed confirmed Grandpa's story. The house still in his name, not my parents', with a life estate and contingent remainder interest to Lily Harris, granddaughter, upon my death. I'd seen enough property packets in the Corps to understand what that meant. They were house-sitting, not owners. The next set of papers made my jaw grind. Bank statements highlighting transfer after transfer from Grandpa's checking to my father's, always framed in memo lines as reimbursements and care costs, some for neat amounts, some for odd, round numbers that screamed ATM withdrawals and catch-up payments. The totals at the bottom of each page told a story my parents had never mentioned. Thousands upon thousands, siphoned one way, never returned. The will was the kicker. It spelled out Grandpa's wishes in calm, careful legal language. His assets managed for his care, house to pass to me, savings divided, with conditions for my parents' access tied explicitly to provision of adequate care, regular presence, and refraining from financial exploitation. I barked out a humorless laugh. Grandma hadn't just seen this coming, she'd built a legal trap for it. And they'd waltzed right in. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking. Not with shock anymore, but with the clean, focused adrenaline of having a plan. I stacked everything back into the tin in the order I'd found it, dropped the cigar box and Grandma's letter into a plain manila folder, and walked out to the driveway. The icy air bit my cheeks, but my brain felt hot. I popped the trunk of my car and slid the folder under the floor panel next to the spare tire where heat and prying eyes couldn't reach. The satisfying thunk of the trunk closing felt like sealing an evidence bag. Back inside, I found my phone and dialed the number Grandma had underlined. It rang twice before a warm male voice answered. "Monroe Law Office," he said. "This is David." "Mr. Monroe," I said. "This is Staff Sergeant Lily Harris. My grandmother was Margaret Harris." There was a pause. "Margaret's Marine," he said. "I've been expecting this call for about 3 years." I blinked. "Expecting?" I repeated. "She told me you'd come home on leave someday, walk into that house, and feel the hair go up on the back of your neck," he said. "Then she said you'd make a pot of ugly coffee and phone me within 24 hours. I glanced at the cold coffee maker. "She was close," I said. "I skipped the coffee." He chuckled once. "Tell me what you found," he said. I kept it tight. The note, the cold house, Grandpa's condition, the documents in the Bible and cigar tin, the hospital's whispers of neglect. By the time I finished, his voice had lost all trace of warmth. "Okay," he said. "Here's what we're looking at. Your grandparents commissioned me to construct layered protections. Life estate for your grandfather in the home, contingent survivorship interest for you, conditional financial arrangements for your parents. Those bank transfers you mentioned may fall under exploitation, depending on what they claimed and how they documented it." He paused. "And leaving him in a 50-degree house with no heat and no phone while they're on a cruise?" he added. That's not just morally disgusting, that's potentially criminal. The word hummed in my ear like a struck wire. Criminal, I repeated. Yes, he said. Elder neglect? Maybe abandonment. They are not just careless, they are legally vulnerable. And your grandfather has already given me in prior meetings authorization to act if he ever became too weak to enforce his own boundaries. Relief and fury tangled in my chest. What do you need from me? I asked. Copies of what you found, he said. Photos of the conditions you walked into. A written statement, timelines, temperatures, the note. And your grandfather's explicit, current wishes if he's lucid enough. Do not confront your parents alone. Not yet. We build the case first, then we choose the battlefield. I pictured a front yard screaming match, my father waving his hands, my mother crying for show, neighbors peeking through blinds. No, he was right. We needed structure, not theater. I'll bring you the copies tomorrow, I said. The office is closed for the holiday, he said. But for Margaret's Marine, I make exceptions. I'll meet you at the converted house on Maple and 3rd. White siding, green shutters. Bring everything. And Lily? Yeah? Your grandmother believed you'd do the right thing even if it made you unpopular, he said. That's the kind of faith a lawyer doesn't see every day. Or a granddaughter, for that matter. The line went quiet after we hung up, but his words stayed, heavy and oddly comforting. I spent the next hour moving like I was back in a field aid station. I walked the house with my phone, snapping photos of everything. The thermostat set low, the empty fridge shelves with only condiments lingering in door crevices, the thin blanket on Grandpa's bed, the stained mattress, the dust in vents, the cut phone cord dangling sadly from the kitchen wall like an exposed nerve. I flipped through drawers half-heartedly organized by my mother, found more receipts, spotted a stack of glossy cruise brochures in the trash, dates circled, little notes in her handwriting. Finally, something for us. For us. I took pictures of those, too. Every photo felt like another nail in a coffin they'd built with their own hands. When my eyes started to blur, I printed the shots at the pharmacy in town, slid them into plastic sleeves in a cheap binder alongside copies of Grandma's documents. I labeled each page in block letters, date, time, description. By the time I was done, the binder felt heavier than it should have. I put Grandpa's original documents back in the cigar tin, back in the Bible's hollow, and locked the whole bundle in my trunk again. Decoy house with valuable guts hidden away. In the quiet that followed, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of lukewarm tea and my notebook, writing a statement the way we'd written post-action reports. Date, time, conditions, actions taken. There was no catharsis in the pen strokes, just clarity. When my phone buzzed, I braced for a text from my parents. There was nothing, just a weather alert about more snow. They hadn't even called to check on him. The next morning, with the sky the color of dirty cotton and frost clinging to the edges of the windshield, I drove to David Monroe's converted house office. White siding, green shutters, a small brass plaque by the door. Inside, it smelled like old books and lemon oil. Not unlike Grandpa's study, but with less dust and more law degrees. David was mid-50s, hair more silver than dark, glasses perched on his nose. He shook my hand firmly, eyes taking in my uniform with a flash of recognition. Come in, Staff Sergeant, he said. Or do you prefer Lily? Lily's fine, I said. We sat at an oak table, not a big imposing desk. He slid a legal pad between us. I laid the binder down. He flipped it open, page by page. His expression went from professional neutral to a thin, tight fury around the mouth. He murmured as he read. Thermostat at 52 in December, no food, social worker's note. Cut phone line. He tapped one photo with his pen, the one of Grandpa's bed. This, he said, is what juries remember. He moved on to the deeds, the will, the bank statements, Grandma's letter. Every few pages he nodded, realizing how thoroughly she had anticipated this. Margaret was no fool, he said. She saw that your parents might choose short-term comfort over long-term honor. She didn't want to believe it, but she prepared for it. He closed the binder with a sigh. Okay, he said. Here's the landscape. Legally, your grandfather owns the house and assets. Your parents were functioning as informal caregivers with conditional future benefits. They violated those conditions when they neglected his basic welfare and exploited his accounts. We can file for an emergency guardianship or conservatorship to protect his finances and person. With his consent, of course. He's lucid, I said. Angry, tired. But he knows exactly what's happening. Good, David said. That makes this cleaner. No one can claim someone else is putting words in his mouth. He folded his hands over the binder. Now we talk about what you want, he said. This can go criminal. It likely will in some form. Do you want to press for charges, or do you want to focus on civil protections, locking down assets, adjusting the will, setting conditions? The word revenge echoed in my memory, Grandpa's cracked whisper bumping up against Grandma's ink. Revenge is fire. Justice plants something after. I want him safe, I said. I want them to never be able to do this to him or anyone again. And I want the house and the money handled the way my grandparents asked. And beyond that? He asked quietly. I thought of my parents' faces when they realized what was coming. The part of me that wanted them to feel every second of the cold they'd left him in. Beyond that, I said slowly, I want options. Not nuclear, not automatic forgiveness, just no more lies. He nodded. Spoken like a Marine who's seen what overreaction looks like, he said. All right, we start with emergency orders, restrict access to his accounts, require your authorization for any major financial moves, set up a formal care plan. Then, when they come home, he flipped the binder back open to the first photo. We'll be waiting, he finished. Here, he added, sliding a pen and a form toward me. This designates you as authorized to speak for him in certain financial and legal matters if he's incapacitated or chooses not to deal with them directly. The words swam for a second. I'd signed similar lines for life or death decisions in war zones. Signing this felt heavier. But when I pictured Grandpa's blue lips, that cold room, the note on the counter, my hand didn't hesitate. I signed. David smiled faintly. Welcome to the other battlefield, he said. We fight with paper and patience here, but the stakes aren't much different. I left his office with the binder back under my arm, a few fresh documents tucked inside, and a new understanding. This wasn't going to be a single confrontation. It was going to be a campaign. And the next move was already on the calendar. Their cruise would end soon. When my parents opened their front door, they wouldn't be walking into the same house they'd left. They'd be walking into a warm room, a living grandfather, and a daughter they'd never bothered to really know, standing beside a man with a briefcase and every receipt they thought didn't exist. They came home in the dark, just like I knew they would. I killed the TV when I saw the headlights swing across the front windows, the beams skating over the bare walls and landing on the empty space where a Christmas tree should have been. No carols, no cinnamon, no blinking lights. Just the low hum of the furnace and the crackle of its vents slowly thawing what they'd tried to freeze. Their SUV door slammed. Laughter floated in first, high, careless, Linda's voice, and then my father's lower rumble, the sound of suitcases thumping onto the porch. I stood in the kitchen with the manila folder on the table and the ripped legal pad note laid neatly beside it, like place settings at the world's worst holiday dinner. The doorknob rattled, keys scraped, the front door swung open in a gust of cold air and cruise ship perfume. Finally, my mother called, flicking on the hall light. Heat's on, see? Nothing to worry about. She stepped fully into the kitchen and stopped dead. Her eyes flicked from my uniform to the folder to the note. Lily, she said, voice flattening. What are you doing here? Hi, Mom, I said. Merry Christmas. My father came in behind her, rolling a suitcase, sunglasses still on his head, like the sun might be hiding behind the living room curtains. Did you touch the thermostat? He demanded before he even looked at me. We set that for a reason. He finally registered who was standing there. Oh, he said, you're home. He sounded about as thrilled as if I'd tracked mud onto the carpet. I nodded toward the yellow scrap on the table. You left me a note, I said. It was inspiring. He squinted, picked it up, read it like he'd never seen it before. Oh, that, he said, tossing it back down. We left you with responsibility. Someone had to step up and help your grandfather. We needed a break. Linda dropped her purse with a sigh. He was fine when we left, she said. Don't start? Fine, I repeated. Interesting choice of word. I folded my arms over my chest so they couldn't see my hands shaking. He was sitting in a 52-degree house, I said. In a room without heat, in his own urine, with the phone cut off. No food, no blanket over him. You call that fine? Their faces shifted, not to guilt, but to defensiveness, the kind I'd seen on detainees when the evidence hit the table. Well, that's dramatic, my dad scoffed. He likes it cooler. And he's an adult. He can get a blanket if he's cold. He can barely stand, I said. You know that. Linda waved a hand. You always overreact, she said. You and your Marine training, everything is life or death. We were gone 1 week. 1. You were gone long enough for him to become hypothermic, I said. ER confirmed it. Social worker called it elder neglect, possibly abandonment. That's not my drama talking. That's their chart. Their mouths both tightened at the word neglect. Social workers just want to justify their jobs, my dad muttered. And he is a burden. We've done everything while you were off playing soldier. I felt something in me go very still. I'm not playing anything, I said quietly. I'm doing my job, which apparently includes coming home and finding my grandfather half dead because his own son and daughter-in-law turned off the heat and took a cruise. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. For a heartbeat, all I could hear was the hum of the furnace and the faint tick of the kitchen clock. Linda recovered first. You don't understand what it's like, she snapped. Day in, day out, taking care of him. No thanks, no break. No heat, I cut in. No food, no phone. Linda, that's not care, that's storage. Her mouth opened, shut. You don't get to come in for 5 minutes and judge, my father started. 5 minutes? I echoed. That's how long it took me to call 911, wrap him in my coat, and get him to the ER. You had weeks, months. I tapped the manila folder. And years, I added. Of this. He frowned. What's that? He asked. Receipts, I said. Photos, bank statements, deeds, wills. I opened the folder and slid the first photo across the table. Grandpa on the bed, flesh gray, blanket twisted, thermometer in the corner of the frame showing the room temperature. Linda flinched. Stop showing that, she said. It's upsetting. It should be, I said. That's the point. I laid out another photo, the thermostat at 52, the empty fridge, the cut phone cord, each image a blow. My father's face reddened. Taking pictures like some kind of cop, he sneered. Is that what the Corps teaches you? To spy on your own family? The Corps taught me to document conditions, I said, especially when someone's life is on the line. I slid the bank statements out next, rows of highlighted transfers. And these, I said, these aren't snapshots. These are habits. Money out of Grandpa's account into yours. Over and over. His eyes darted over the pages, searching for a loophole. We paid for this house, he insisted. We take care of him. Those were reimbursements. Reimbursements, I repeated. Is that what you call turning off the heat and walking away? Because I'm pretty sure the law calls that something else. His jaw clenched. Oh, here we go, Linda said, throwing her hands up. You're going to call the police on your own parents? On Christmas? I called an ambulance on Christmas, I said. Because you didn't. Their retorts died on their lips when headlights swept across the window again, this time not from a speeding SUV, but from a slow, careful sedan pulling into the driveway. I didn't turn around. You might want to sit down, I said. The front door opened with a cautious click. Footsteps, 2 sets. One heavier, one lighter and measured. A nurse in scrubs appeared in the kitchen doorway first, carrying a small overnight bag and a clipboard. Behind her, leaning on a cane but walking under his own power, was Grandpa. He wore a thick flannel shirt and a proper down jacket. His cheeks had a little color. A hospital wristband still circled his wrist, but his eyes were clear. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. Dad, she gasped. Why aren't you in a hospital? He finished. Because they decided I was well enough to be somewhere warm. Somewhere with food. Somewhere not run by people who leave old men in meat lockers. His gaze slid to me. He gave the smallest nod us. Howdy, kids, he said. Merry Christmas. The nurse, Ms. Henderson, according to her badge, stepped forward. As we discussed, Harold, she said gently, I'll just be getting you settled and then I'll give you privacy. He waved a hand. You can hear this, he said. You're a witness. Don't mind one more unpleasant story. My parents bristled, outrage prickling off them like static. We are not, my father started. Sit down, Grandpa said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Years of authority in boardrooms and banks sat behind that tone. Even depleted, he carried it like a coat he could shrug on at will. They sat. He shuffled to his old chair in the living room, lowering himself with a small grunt. Ms. Henderson hovered near, but let him do most of it. Once he was settled, I brought the manila folder and set it on the coffee table between us like a centerpiece. This feels familiar, he said dryly. Only last time I was the one making sure other men's paperwork matched their words. He looked at my father. Thomas, he said, tell me again how you took such good care of me. My dad swallowed. We did, he insisted. You paid for nothing, Grandpa cut in. I paid this house off before you turned 30. I floated your bad investments. I covered your missed mortgage payments. Your mother and I did that gladly because that's what family does. He pointed a shaking finger at the thermostat on the wall. What family does not do, he said, is turn off the heat in December, cut the phone, empty the pantry, and sail off into the sunset, hoping the old man will conveniently not be here when you get back. Linda's eyes filled with tears. We just needed a break, she whispered. We were exhausted. You're so critical, always. He lifted his chin. You don't get to play martyr when you bought cruise tickets with my pension, he said. When you left me in a house cold enough to kill a younger man than me. Ms. Henderson's pen scratched quietly on her clipboard. My father's knee bounced. You're making it sound so ugly, he snapped. You've always been dramatic, Dad. We were gone a week. Lily's blowing this out of proportion for attention. I almost laughed. Grandpa did once, humorless. You want to talk proportion? He asked. Let's talk numbers. He opened the folder with shaking hands. I reached out and steadied the edge so the pages wouldn't slide. He tapped the deed. House is still in my name, he said. You know that. We agreed when your mother passed this would be my home until I died. Then we'd talk about splitting things. He slid the next document out, the will copy, and we agreed, with Margaret watching from the other side, that this house would then go to Lily to share, fairly as she saw fit, he said, because she's the one who shows up, not for what she can get, for who she can help. My father blanched. You never... I did, Grandpa said. You weren't listening. You heard what you wanted. That's been your problem since you were 12. He shifted his gaze to Linda. And you, he said. You married in. You got the benefit of this roof, this bank account, these holidays. You also got the responsibility. You took the pretty part and skipped the rest. She sniffed. We tried, she said. You're impossible to please. You don't need to please me, he said. You needed to keep me warm and fed. You failed. You turned down the thermostat and turned off compassion. That's not caregiving. That's cowardice. Ms. Henderson cleared her throat softly. Mr. Harris has given me permission to confirm, she said, looking at them. The hospital diagnosed him with hypothermia. He was dehydrated and malnourished. This is serious. It meets legal definitions that are not pretty. The word legal made my mother flinch harder than malnourished had. What happens now? She asked, voice thin. Now, Grandpa said, we stop pretending this is a misunderstanding. He gestured to me. Lily went to see David, he said, just like your mother planned. David has the original documents, the will, the deed, the evidence. My father stared at me, betrayal and fear warring in his eyes. You went to a lawyer? He asked. Our lawyer? Grandma's lawyer, I corrected. Yours by coincidence, not by loyalty. Grandpa nodded. We're going to formalize what Margaret and I intended, he said. Lily will help manage my care. David will oversee the financial part, and you two. He looked at them with a weary kind of sadness. You will not have control over my money or this house ever again, he finished. My father's face contorted. You can't do that, he snarled. We've lived here for years. We've sacrificed. You can stay, Grandpa interrupted, and a flicker of hope crossed their faces before he added, as long as it's good for my health and the law agrees. But this is my house, my name, my choice. And if you ever leave me in the cold again... His fingers tightened on the cane. I will let the law call it what it is, and do what it does, he said, even if that means my own son on a docket. The room went very, very quiet. The furnace clicked on again, sending another wave of warm air through the vents, a low exhale that made the curtain by the window stir. Linda's mascara had started to smudge, dark streaks under her eyes. We didn't mean, she started. I know exactly what you meant, Grandpa said. You meant to take a vacation and hope the problem solved itself while you were gone. You gambled with my life so you could drink cocktails on a deck. He looked at me again, eyes softer. You asked me about revenge, Lily, he said. This isn't it. This is just turning on the lights. He leaned back into his chair, suddenly looking every day of his 80-something years. Next, we sit down with David and Ms. Henderson, he said. We put every ugly thing on the table. And we decide who gets to be in this family going forward. He closed his eyes for a moment, the conversation and the trip clearly draining him. The nurse stepped in, hand on his shoulder. That's enough for tonight, she said gently. You need rest. He nodded, surrendering. As she helped him up, my parents watched, small and silent on the couch that no longer felt like theirs. I gathered the papers back into the folder, leaving only the ripped note on the coffee table. My father stared at it, the loopy handwriting he'd once praised my mother for looking suddenly like a confession. This isn't fair, he muttered. No, I said, it's not, but it's accurate. Ms. Henderson led Grandpa toward his warmed, cleaned bedroom, the one I'd spent the afternoon restoring with fresh linens and a space heater aimed just right. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at me. Lily, he said, bring that Bible tomorrow. David will need it. I nodded. Got it, I said. He disappeared down the hall, footsteps slow but steady. In the living room, my parents sat in the glow of the lamplight, cruise tans already looking ridiculous in our Midwestern winter. For once, I didn't feel like the child in the room. I felt like what I was, the one carrying the mission. They weren't arrested. Not yet. No handcuffs. No dramatic wailing neighbors. Just the quiet, dawning realization that the world had shifted without their permission. The next move wouldn't be in this living room. It would be across town at a mediator's table where feelings wouldn't matter nearly as much as signatures, repayment plans, and who Grandpa chose to trust with the rest of his life. And this time, they weren't going to be the ones writing the story. The mediation room smelled like burnt coffee and photocopier toner. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a flat glow over the oval table, the stack of manila folders, and the pitcher of water no one touched. A small, artificial tree sagged in the corner, half its lights dead, tinsel drooping, festive in the same way a bandage is decorative. Ms. Henderson sat at one end with her clipboard, neutral and steady. David Monroe sat beside her, briefcase open, glasses glinting. At the far side of the table, my parents looked smaller than I'd ever seen them, winter coats still damp from the flurries outside. I took my seat opposite them, back straight, palms flat on the table. Grandpa sat to my right, bundled in a thick cardigan, a knit cap pulled low over his ears, eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. This time, he wasn't in a hospital gown. He was here by choice. Thank you all for coming, Ms. Henderson began, voice even. This is not a criminal proceeding. This is a voluntary mediation to address concerns about Mr. Harris's care and assets. That said, she tapped the top file with a red fingernail. What we discuss here can absolutely influence any legal investigations that may follow. So, I encourage honesty. My father shifted in his chair. We already said we're sorry for... Any misunderstandings, he muttered. Dragging us here is overkill. David slid a photo across the table without a word. It was the one of Grandpa's bare, stretched hand on the stained sheet, thermostat in the background. My mother flinched like it was a weapon. This is not a misunderstanding, David said. His voice stayed calm, but there was iron under it. It's a condition, on a specific date, with specific parameters. He pulled out another sheet. Hospital records show hypothermia and dehydration, he continued. The social worker's report notes an empty pantry, disabled landline, and thermostat set to 52 degrees during a winter storm. Mr. Harris was alone. No emergency contact was active. No neighbor was informed. Do you dispute any of that? He looked at my parents. They stared at the paper like it might blink first. That's how he likes it, my father said finally. He's always liked it cold, we told you. And he was fine when we left. Thermostat at 72 and a coat on is likes it cold, I said. 52 with no blanket is death by inches. Ms. Henderson held up a hand, not to shush me, but to keep the rhythm. Mr. and Mrs. Harris, she said, I want to be very clear. What we saw at the hospital meets the statutory definition of elder neglect. The only reason we are not already in court is because your father, she nodded to Grandpa, asked to try mediated accountability first. Grandpa's fingers flexed on his cane. Because I still have some hope you might grow up, he said. At least a little. My mother's chin wobbled. You don't know what it's like, she whispered. Every day, the complaints, the demands, the doctor appointments. You canceled those, I cut in. We saw the records. David slid another page forward. Appointment logs, dates crossed out, notes about family canceled, no reschedule. Let's focus, he said. We're not here to debate who is more tired. We're here to outline what happened and what happens next. He opened a fresh folder and turned it so they could see the heading, Proposed Protective Arrangements. Mr. Harris has confirmed he wants the following, David said. 1. All of his accounts moved under a conservatorship with co-authorization by himself and Lily. 2. Repayment of a portion of the funds transferred to your account without clear documentation. 3. Legal restriction on your ability to adjust his utilities, access his accounts, or make medical decisions without his and Lily's consent. 4. Voluntary enrollment in caregiver training. My father's face flushed deep red. You want me to ask permission to turn on my own lights? He snapped. You wanted him to die in the dark, I said. So, yes, for now. He slammed his hand on the table, making the water pitcher jump. This is ridiculous, he barked. We've been caring for him for years. We've sacrificed. We put our lives on hold. Your lives looked pretty lively on that cruise, I said. Nice tan, by the way. Ms. Henderson's gaze cut sharp to me, not with anger, but with a subtle warning. Staff Sergeant, she said quietly. Let the documents do some of the talking. I exhaled slowly, forced my shoulders to drop a fraction. David slid a different stack of papers forward. These are the transfer summaries, he said evenly. Over 5 years, roughly $80,000 moved from Mr. Harris's account to yours. Some documented, utilities, groceries, property taxes, many labeled simply as reimbursement, or not labeled at all. He pointed to highlighted lines. Combined with the neglect report, he said, this looks less like sacrifice and more like exploitation. My mother's eyes brimmed with tears. We were overwhelmed, she whispered. We didn't ask for this. He's so critical. No matter what we did, it wasn't enough. And then Lily sends money and he praises her. There it is, Grandpa murmured. He sounded more tired than angry. There what is, my father snapped. The story you've been telling yourselves, Grandpa said. That this was all some horrible burden dropped on you by an ungrateful old man and a show-off granddaughter. It's cleaner than admitting you liked the checks and the house more than you liked being decent. Silence settled again. Ms. Henderson scribbled notes, the scratch of her pen loud in the quiet. My father looked away first. So what, you just cut us off? He asked. Throw your own son and daughter-in-law to the curb? Grandpa shook his head. I'm not throwing you anywhere, class, he said. But I am stepping between you and the wheel of this bus before you drive us all off a cliff. David slid another document across, the proposed repayment schedule. Based on your income and expenses, he said, we've calculated an amount you can realistically repay over time. It won't be fun, but it's not impossible. The point isn't to ruin you. It's to turn misuse into acknowledgement. Ms. Henderson looked up. And the caregiver training is non-negotiable, she added. If you want to continue to have any role in Harold's day-to-day life, you need practical skills and a clear understanding of what neglect looks like. Because what you did, whether you admit it or not, met that threshold. My mother let out a soft, broken sound. This is humiliating, she said. For you? I asked. Try being the man on the bed. Grandpa shot me a look, gentle, restraining. Let her speak, he said. She twisted a tissue in her hands until it shredded. I didn't know it was that cold, she said. Tom set the thermostat. I thought, he said Dad runs hot and the bill was too high. I didn't check. I just assumed he'd be fine in blankets. I shouldn't have assumed. If you didn't know, it's because you didn't look, Ms. Henderson said. There was no cruelty in it, just fact. Caregiving means looking, even when you're tired, even when it's uncomfortable. My father stared at the repayment paper, jaw working. You want us to sign this, he said. And what, magically we're forgiven? You forget you called us criminals? I met his gaze. I don't forget anything, I said. This isn't magic. This is accountability. You sign, you pay back what you took, you learn how to not nearly kill someone you claim to love, and we see if, over time, something like trust can grow again. I glanced at Grandpa. Or you don't sign, I added. And we go another route. David didn't have to explain what that route was. Police. Charges. Courtrooms not decorated with half-dead Christmas trees. My father swallowed. Why put her in charge? He asked, jerking his chin at me. Why not some neutral party? Why not you? He said to David. Grandpa's mouth quirked. Because some things aren't neutral, he said. And because your mother believed in Lily. I trust my late wife's judgment more than I trust your convenience. His eyes went to me. And because when things got bad, he said softly, she didn't book a cruise. She called 911 and wrapped me in her coat. Something in my chest went hot and sore at the same time. That's not heroism, I said. That's baseline. Maybe for you, he said. Not for everyone. David cleared his throat. We can argue philosophy all day, he said. But the practical matter is this. Mr. Harris has capacity. He has clearly expressed wishes. The law backs him. You can work within the structure he's chosen, or you can fight it and likely lose more. He slid pens across the table, one to each of them. Take a moment, he said. Talk quietly if you need. But understand, there is no later where we pretend this meeting didn't happen. They didn't huddle, they didn't whisper. They just sat there, eyes darting between the pages and each other, faced for the first time with consequences they couldn't smooth over with church smile apologies and casserole dishes. After a long minute, my mother reached for the pen with a shaking hand. I can't lose my father entirely, she said. I won't. If this is the way, then this is the way. My father stared at her, then at me, then at the window where weak winter light spilled through frosted glass. You're really okay with her holding our leash? He muttered. It's not a leash, I said. It's a thermostat set above freezing. He snorted once, bitter. Then he took the pen. Fine, he said. We sign, we pay, we learn whatever class you want us to take. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. And then what? He asked. You still hate us? I didn't flinch. I never hated you, I said. I hated what you did. Huge difference. Grandpa watched me, eyes bright. And that's why she's the right one for this, he said. They signed, one line, then another, names in ink that would outlast excuses. Ms. Henderson countersigned. David notarized. The official weight of stamps and seals landed like quiet thunder. Going forward, Miss Henderson said, we'll have regular welfare checks, financial oversight, and care coordination with Lily as point of contact. If you slip, if conditions deteriorate, or if there's evidence of further neglect, this file goes straight to Adult Protective Services with my full report. My parents nodded, cowed. No dramatic sobbing. No scene. Just the realization that the world they'd controlled inside Grandpa's house had grown larger than their will. When we stepped out into the cold parking lot afterward, the sky was a flat sheet of gray. Our breaths puffed little clouds into the air. Grandpa leaned on my arm as Ms. Henderson walked ahead to warm up her car. You did good in there, Maureen, he said. I nearly lost my temper, I admitted. Nearly, he said. But you didn't. That's the difference between revenge and justice. I tightened my grip on his elbow as he slid a little on a patch of black ice. You sure about letting them stay in the picture? I asked. We could have gone scorched earth. He looked at the hospital band still circling his wrist, then at the signed papers folded neatly in my hand. Fire's already been, he said. Now we see what grows. He angled his head toward the distant shape of the house down the street, smoke from its chimney curling faintly into the winter sky. You remember what your grandmother wrote? He asked. About planting after? Yeah, I said. Good, he murmured. Because the next part, that's when we find out if any of us can actually do it. The wind cut sharper then, making my eyes water. It could have been the cold. Or it could have been the fact that for the first time since I'd walked into that freezing house, I felt the faintest flicker of something under the anger. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of something more than just punishing them. Now we had to see what we would do with it. Grandpa moved back into the house 3 days after mediation. Not alone, Miss Henderson helped me coordinate a home health nurse rotation, Meals on Wheels, and a physical therapist who looked like he could deadlift a car but spoke to Grandpa like he was briefing a respected officer, not a patient. I moved my duffel into my old room at first, turning the space I'd once wallpapered with band posters into a bivouac of pill organizers, discharge instructions, and marine workout bands draped over the closet door. The house itself seemed confused. Heat on, curtains open, kettle on the stove. But there were still ghosts in the corners, in the scrape marks on the floor where my parents' suitcases had dragged, in the faint line of cold dust on the wall where the thermostat had sat too low for too long. I did what I knew. I made lists, daily meds, meals, exercises, appointments. The repayment schedule, which started ticking the week after mediation, sat on the fridge under a magnet shaped like a snowman, the irony not lost on me. My parents came by twice a week at first, not unannounced, never without calling. The first time they arrived after mediation, they stood on the porch steps like kids waiting outside a principal's office. I opened the door but didn't step aside immediately. Here for dinner or for a performance, Cha? I asked. My mother flinched. For dinner, she said. If we're still invited. I stepped back. Grandpa's rules, I said. Not mine. Today he said yes. They filled the doorway slowly, leaving shoes on the mat, eyes scanning the warm living room as if making sure it was real. Grandpa sat in his usual chair, a blanket over his knees, TV muted. He watched them come in with that same bank manager gaze, weighing liabilities and assets. You're late, he said mildly. My father glanced at his watch. Traffic, he said. Grandpa tapped the arm of his chair. Next time, leave earlier, he said. I'm old. I don't have extra minutes to spare waiting on your excuses. He let the edge of the rebuke sit there, then softened it with a small wave toward the couch. Sit, he added. We're not going to spend the whole night clobbering each other. That was last week. Dinner was uncomfortable in the way rehab is. Small movements, small talk, everything aching. We talked about the weather, my deployment, the local high school football team. My parents tried to pretend we were normal. We were not. But there were fewer lies than there'd been in years. When they left, my father lingered in the doorway, breath fogging in the cold air. I sent the first payment, he said, not quite looking at me. The money thing. You can check with David. I already did, I said. Thank you. His jaw flexed, unused to the feel of gratitude from this side of the equation. Over the next weeks, patterns built themselves like muscle memory. Every Friday, another payment hit Grandpa's conservatorship account. It wasn't huge, but it was steady. That mattered more than the number. Every Tuesday, my parents went to caregiver training at the senior center, learning about pressure sores and fluid intake, and the difference between tired and neglect. Ms. Henderson sent me occasional updates. They're showing up. They're quiet. They're learning. Every Sunday we had dinner, if Grandpa felt up to it. The first time he dozed off in his chair mid-conversation, and my mother jumped up to fetch a blanket on her own without prompting or dramatics, I had to look away. It was such a small thing. It was also something she'd never done before. One afternoon, while Grandpa was at a doctor's appointment with the nurse and I had the house to myself, I took Grandma's letter from my uniform pocket and smoothed it out on the kitchen table. The blue ink had faded slightly. Revenge is fire in dry grass. I traced the words with a fingertip. I thought about the way my parents' faces had crumpled when Grandpa walked into the house that night alive, when they realized their choices had witnesses, when they signed the repayment plan. Fire had already done its work. Now we were working with what was left. I'd been angry every day since I found that ripped note. Anger had gotten me to the phone, to the ER, to David's office. But it wasn't going to rebuild this family or this house. That was the part nobody explains in revenge stories. You can't stay at a rolling boil forever. Your body won't let you. One evening, weeks later, I came into the living room with a mug of tea to find Grandpa watching a home video on the old DVD player. Footage I barely remembered existed. Tiny me toddling across this same living room in pink overalls, chasing a plastic ball while my parents and grandparents laughed off camera. The room looked warmer, smaller, fuller. "We used to know how to do this," Grandpa said quietly, "before money made us stupid." I sat on the edge of the coffee table watching my younger self bump into furniture and giggle. "They chose," I said. "Yes," he said. "They did, and so did we. We forgave things we shouldn't have. We let small cruelties pass, then bigger ones." He took a sip of his own tea. "You're different," he added. "You're not willing to pretend nothing happened." "That a compliment?" I asked. "It's a warning," he said, mouth quirking. "People will call you harsh, unforgiving, difficult. That's the price of not letting rot slide under the floorboards, but—" He looked at me, eyes steady. "I'd rather have one difficult, honest granddaughter than 10 easy liars." Heat rose in my chest and sat there. We watched the video in silence until it looped back to the beginning. On Sundays, my parents started coming early to help cook. At first, they fumbled, unused to my way of doing things. My mother grabbed the wrong spices. My father burned the rolls. Grandpa made dry jokes about 2 decades of practice and still no idea where the salt lives. Slowly, something almost like rhythm developed. One Sunday, I walked in from checking Grandpa's meds to find my father on a step stool, changing the air filter in the furnace like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You used to ignore those," I said. "Said they were a scam." He shrugged. "I read some things," he said gruffly. "Apparently, clean filters are part of this heat idea you like so much." He said this and "you," like he wasn't standing under the benefit of both. "Thanks," I said. He nodded once. I didn't trust him yet, but I trusted the filter. At night, after everyone left and the house settled into quiet, I would sit at the kitchen table with Grandpa's bills and the repayment ledger, ticking boxes. Each checkmark felt less like revenge and more like a slow, stubborn knitting back together of cause and effect. You took, you return, you left, you show up. One Wednesday, my mother came alone. She stood in the doorway with a grocery bag full of basics: rice, soup, tea, the good kind Grandma used to buy. "I know you have food," she said. "I just wanted to bring something. It feels wrong not to." She placed the bags on the counter, then hesitated. "Can I see the letter?" she asked. My hand went instinctively to my pocket. "What letter?" I asked. She swallowed. "The one Mom left you," she said. "The one you keep tucked there like armor. I won't ask to read it if you don't want me to. I want to know what she said that she didn't trust me to hear." There was no accusation in it, just sorrow. I studied her face, the lines deeper than I remembered. Mascara worn away, hair messier, less styled. Not the woman who had breezed onto the porch bragging about cruise cocktails. A different one. I pulled the envelope out, hesitated, then held it between us. You can read it here, I said. Not take it, not copy it, just here. At the table. She nodded like I'd offered her a gift. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the pages. Her eyes tracked slowly, left to right, taking in the lines about character, comfort, trust. Tears fell silently onto the ink. When she reached the part about Lily will know what to do when things feel wrong, she pressed her lips together. I thought she trusted me, she whispered. She did, I said. In some ways. In others, she'd known you longer than I had. She let out a small, wounded laugh. That sounds like Mom, she said. She finished reading, folded the letter carefully, and slid it back to me. I'm sorry, she said. Not just for the house. For every time I made you feel crazy for seeing what was right in front of us. The apology wasn't perfect, it wasn't supposed to be, but it landed, heavy and real, somewhere under my sternum. Thank you, I said. We stood there in a kitchen that had seen too many secrets, two women holding the same piece of paper and finally maybe reading the same reality. Later that night, Grandpa dozed off with the TV on. I switched it off, tucked the blanket around his feet, and went to the window. Outside, snow fell soft and steady, blurring the streetlights into halos. The house felt different. Not healed. Not yet. But warmer. The thermostat hummed quietly, steady at a number that wouldn't kill anyone. On the fridge, the repayment calendar had more dates highlighted in green than red. In my pocket, Grandma's letter crackled against my fingers. We weren't done. There would be slips, old habits, days where my father's voice got too sharp or my mother's instinct to minimize reared up like a reflex. But we had something we'd never had before. Paper trails, boundaries, and the knowledge that when they'd walked back into this house, they hadn't found the obedient daughter they'd left, or the quiet old man they assumed would never speak. They'd found a Marine with receipts and a grandfather who refused to die before telling the truth. The next step wasn't just keeping Grandpa safe. It was deciding who we were going to be when he was gone. And whether this house would go back to being a slow, polite disaster or stay the place where we'd finally turn the heat on. Spring came in small ways first, not the big cinematic melt, but the quiet stuff. Salt crust washing off the driveway, sun hanging a little longer in the front window, Grandpa's breath not fogging the kitchen when he shuffled in for coffee. By March, his hospital band was off. The cane stayed, but more as a precaution than a necessity. The house had a rhythm I could feel even when I woke up in the middle of the night. Furnace purring, fridge humming, his soft snore through the wall. The resentment that had driven me like a second heartbeat eased into something heavier and steadier. Responsibility. One Saturday morning, I sat at the dining table with a thick VA pamphlet spread out, mug of coffee cooling beside me, while Grandpa sorted his pill organizer with the concentration of a bomb tech. Got a minute? He asked, snapping a lid shut. Always, I said. He slid a folded packet across the table. This is the updated deed, he said. And this, he tapped the second page, is the life estate rider David drew up. House stays in my name as long as I'm breathing. After that, you and only you decide what happens. I unfolded it, scanning the crisp legal language, my name threaded through it like a new foundation beam. You sure? I asked. We could split it, he finished. Hand chunks to people who treated it like a vending machine? No. He shook his head. Your grandmother and I watched this place go up brick by brick, he said. We don't need it to be a trophy over anybody's mantle. We need it to be in the hands of someone who knows what warmth is for. He squeezed my hand once, his palm dry and warm. You're that someone, he said simply. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. I'll take care of it, I said. And you. Good, he said. That's all the revenge I ever wanted. He said revenge wryly, but the word didn't sting the way it used to. A few weeks later, he asked for something I didn't expect. Think we're ready for a Sunday dinner? He said, spoon pausing over his oatmeal. A real one, with them. I looked up from my notebook. You sure? I asked. We don't have to rush this. They're on schedule with the payments. They're doing the trainings. We can keep things formal. He shrugged. Formal is for banks, he said. This is my family. Messy's part of the point. I thought about it for a long second. Okay, I said, but ground rules. He smiled. Spoken like a Marine. And we made them simple. No minimizing, no, it wasn't that bad, no weaponizing guilt. If anyone started rewriting history, I'd call it. If Grandpa got tired, the night ended, no argument. On the first warmish Sunday of April, I roasted a chicken the way Grandma used to. Lemon, rosemary, potatoes underneath to catch the drippings. The house smelled like it used to at holidays, only this time there was no performance layer, no forced laughter, no nervous glances at the thermostat. When the doorbell rang, my stomach still clenched. Old habits die the loudest. I opened the door to find my parents on the porch, each holding something fragile. My mother had a casserole dish, broccoli and cheese, still steaming under foil. My father had a 6-pack of cheap root beer Grandpa used to like. Hi, I said. Hi, my mother echoed. Her voice was small. We brought sides. I stepped back. Come in, I said. Shoes off, please. It said something about how things had changed that they obeyed without arguing. Grandpa was in his chair, dressed in his good flannel, hair combed, hands folded like he was waiting for a board meeting that might actually matter. Hey, Dad, my father said quietly. Grandpa's face softened. Tom, he said. Janet, he let the name sit a beat. House feels different, my mother said. Warm. No cruise tickets in the budget, Grandpa said dryly. Helps? They winced, but they smiled too. At the table, we passed dishes around like people learning a new drill. Conversation stumbled at first, then found tracks. My deployment stories, toned down for civilian stomachs, my father's grumbling about the caregiver class instructor who takes no nonsense from anyone, including me. My mother's awkward pride when she mentioned telling her church friends the real version of the winter, not the cleaned-up one. Mid-meal, my father put his fork down. I need to say something, he said. Every muscle in my back tightened. Okay, I said carefully. He looked at Grandpa first. I failed you, he said. No buildup, no qualifying. I took your money, your heat, and your trust for granted. I told myself you'd be fine because I didn't want to look at how bad it really was. He looked at me next. And you, he said. I made you feel like the crazy one for seeing it, when you were the only one who wasn't. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry, he said. I don't expect you to trust me just because I said that, but I needed it on record. The room was so quiet I could hear the soft tick of the wall clock and the distant hum of the fridge. My mother cleared her throat. I'm sorry too, she whispered. For the cruise. For the stories I told so I didn't have to feel what I feel now. For every time I called you dramatic instead of admitting I was scared. Her eyes met mine. You were right, she said. I hate that. I'm grateful for it. Both can be true. Something loosened under my ribs. Grandpa nodded slowly. Accountability looks good on you, he said. Keep it. It suits. We didn't hug. Nobody cried on anyone's shoulder. We just picked our forks back up and finished our plates. Later, after they left with Tupperware and a list of Grandpa's upcoming appointments pinned to the fridge by the repayment calendar, I stood in the doorway and watched their car pull away. The night air was cool but not punishing. The house behind me glowed warm and yellow. Grandpa shuffled up beside me, leaning on his cane. Not bad for a first run, he said. Could have been worse, I agreed. He nudged my shoulder with his. You did what your grandmother asked, he said. You chose justice over fire. I still wanted the fire, I admitted. Wanting it's human, he said, not lighting the whole field anyway. That's where the strength is. Weeks turned to months. Spring became summer, then a gentle fall. Grandpa's health stabilized in that fragile way old bodies do. Good days, bad days, more laughs than I'd dared to hope. My parents kept showing up. They missed a payment once. I called it immediately. They corrected it, no excuses. They slipped into it wasn't so bad language once at dinner. I corrected that too. They backed up, rephrased, eyes open this time. Little by little, the house stopped feeling like a crime scene and started feeling like what it had always wanted to be, a home where people messed up, owned it, and tried again. I stayed through the end of my leave, then arranged staggered visits and backup care with Ms. Henderson and the nursing team before heading back to base. The first time I left, my gut twisted. But this time, the heat was on, the pantry full, the phone line connected, and the neighbor had our numbers on a post-it by her fridge. I kissed Grandpa's cheek at the door. "You going to be okay without your Marine Guard dog?" I asked. He smiled. "I've got a pack now," he said. "Nurses, social worker, lawyer, an ex-neglectful son who's afraid of his own conscience for once, and a granddaughter who shows up even when she's halfway around the world." He tapped my chest. "Besides," he said, "you installed that security system in here." He meant more than cameras and locks. On my last night before heading back, I sat alone in the living room. No TV, no music, just the sound of the furnace humming and the soft clink of Grandpa's spoon in his bedroom as he set his water glass down. The thermostat read a steady 70. I looked around at the little changes: grab bars in the hall, non-slip rugs, the repayment chart with most of the boxes filled, Grandma's Bible back on its shelf instead of hiding secrets. On the coffee table, the ripped note from December was tucked into a folder, not as a weapon now, but as part of the record, proof of where we'd started. I picked up Grandma's letter, read her looping handwriting one more time, then returned it to my pocket. "What now?" I whispered, mostly to myself. The house answered in its own quiet ways: warm air on my skin, soft lamp glow, no draft under the door. Now we kept going. We held the line. We made sure the warmest room in the house belonged to the truth, not the lie that keeping quiet kept things whole. As I turned off the last light and headed down the hall, I realized revenge hadn't been the point for a long time. Justice had, and justice, boring, paperwork heavy, patient, had done something revenge never could have. It had kept my grandfather alive. It had forced my parents to grow up. And it had finally given that old, cold house a chance to feel safe. For him, for them, and for me.